Last month, I read not one, not two, but three lesbian books, so you cannot fault me for not celebrating Pride Month. But before we get into all the lesbian action, let's talk about the other books I read, because I read 5 total. So it's a good haul for me because the first one I read was a very short one. It is titled The Blue Fox. I briefly talked about it on my last month's TBR. It's by an author who goes by a single name, I guess. Sjón, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. He's an Icelandic guy. So he's doing the whole prince thing with a single name. But it's very parable-like. It takes place, of course, in the wintry landscape of Iceland, and it's about a guy who's hunting a blue fox in the snow. But then it quickly shifts over to a more dramatic, multi-character story where they find a shipwreck, and there's a woman with Down syndrome on it. And so there's a little bit of a mystery afoot, you might say. Overall, I thought it was okay. It wasn't great. It was a little disjointed, but again, it had that very mythical parable kind of vibe to it. It was doing some cool things. You can see right here, there's some interesting white space decisions. I was hoping they would sort of be a rhythmic indicator of the plot or what's going on, but unfortunately, I didn't really notice that whatsoever. But there's one other cool thing prose-wise for you writer nerds out there, and I'd never seen this before in fiction. But there is a portion in part of the book where the protagonist is freezing to death. He's been buried by an avalanche. And the narrative itself was stuttering. So there was no dialogue because he was just describing his environment, how he felt about it in narration, third-person narration. And I thought that was a cool touch. So overall, The Blue Fox, if you're in the mood for an Icelandic tale that is cold and frosty, that doesn't really amount to a whole lot, that quite possibly has some subtext that I completely missed, then you might want to check it out. It's very short. It's got that going for it. All right, the next book I read was one you guys have been requesting for a long time. That is The Warrior Prophet by R. Scott Baker. I finished it. It was tough. There's some great things about it, but I felt like what I enjoyed about the darkness that comes before was absolutely lacking in this book, and that is the fantastic characterization, which you often don't get in fantasy novels, at least many of the fantasy novels I've read, because it's much more about the world building, about the plot, etc., etc. Baker seemed like he did a complete pivot in this novel, and I think I discovered what he was trying to do. If you guys want me to do a full review, let me know down in the comments, but I feel like reviewing second books in a series is kind of weird because on one hand, it's either the people who have already read the book or it's people who read book 1 and are curious about book 2. My guess is, and you guys can tell me in the comments, those of you who have read it already, it seems like Baker is trying to present commentary that you can easily manipulate masses with very rudimentary philosophy or psychology, however you want to spin it, because that was the biggest problem, or one of the biggest problems I had with this book, is that the quote-unquote master manipulator, let's call him, is kind of a Mary Sue, kind of ridiculous, kind of a pawn, kind of a characterless character. But I think that's the point. I think Baker is trying to use sort of an empty vessel as a tool to do X, Y, and Z. But then also on the flip side, he's trying to commentate to us as the reader how simple it is to get people to do what you want them to do. My problem is I like to be manipulated by the writer himself. So when the manipulation is revealed, I feel like I was manipulated alongside the character, which of course requires fantastic characterization, which unfortunately this book lacks. Overall, it wasn't bad. I would say it's worse than the first book in the series, in my opinion, of course. Will I read the next one? I really don't know. I feel like Baker is a writer that values things that I don't really value as much in storytelling. He seems to value more the commentary, the ideation, the concepts, if you will, versus actually exploring psychology and the characterization and having the reader really get behind these people. Because while I praised his characterization of Esmenet and Acamian in the first book, in this book, they're just kind of hung out to dry, so to speak. They're just not that interesting, and there is nobody else there to pick up the slack. So there's my mini review of The Warrior Prophet. But like I said, let me know if you guys want me to do a full review down below in the comments. All right, the next book I read and already did a review for because I was so passionate about it, about the ending, of course, not in a positive way, in a negative way, and that is The Lamb by Lucy Rose. Overall, I would say I enjoyed this book. There's some really fantastic things about it. Granted, it is a first novel by a brand new writer, so it is bound to have some rough edges. But if you don't know, and if you haven't watched my review yet, the story about a mother and a daughter. The daughter is 11 years old, and she's the narrator of this tale. They're both cannibals. Yes, they eat people. They capture what they call strays, which are people who are either on a hiking trip and get lost, or maybe their car breaks down. But anyway, it has some very fairy tale undertones. It's classified as folk horror as well. But that ending, oof, that ending, very lazy, very unfair to the reader. Go check out my review if you want to hear my complete thoughts, including a brief spoilery discussion about the ending and why it frustrated me so much. The next book I read was Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield, my second lesbian book of the month. The first one, of course, being The Lamb. I forgot to mention that. This one was recommended to me by a viewer. She's also on my Discord server, so you should come hang out with us. And she sold me this book by saying the relationship of the two characters in the book are reminiscent of the biologist and her husband from Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. And I said, okay, you sold me. I'm going to read this thing. I'm really glad I did. It's not doing anything revolutionary. It's about two married women, and one of which goes on a deep sea expedition in a submarine, and she finds something she doesn't expect. She's obsessed with her work, while her partner is kind of left to deal with the aftermath of the expedition. So the way the story is told, it's in two perspectives. The first one is the woman dealing with the aftermath after her wife comes back from her expedition, and something's wrong. She's changing physically and mentally. She's in the bathtub all the time. She's got to pour salt water in it. Her skin is becoming kind of iridescent. And so she's dealing with all this stuff, grappling with it as her relationship falls apart. The second part of the novel is about the woman who went on the expedition, but it's told in past tense. So we get to actually experience the expedition from beginning to end to see exactly what happens. I really love the structure in this because it's flip-flopping between POVs in every single chapter. So you get this really nice contrast of voice and style, and you get to see the obsession of one woman versus the other one kind of reminiscing about how things used to be. So it felt to me like a commentary on relationships, or maybe even ending a relationship. And I think I'm going to do a review because I feel like this book is worth talking about. But Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield, I really liked it. All right, the last book I read in June, the one you guys voted for out there, which I was really looking forward to, We Used to Live Here by Mark Cleaver, the third and final lesbian book I read in the month of June. And it was utterly disappointing. I was really looking forward to this one. I love House of Leaves. I have 2 copies behind me, you guys can see back there. I was hoping it was going to be full of dread, full of unease, something that I could really sink into. However, what I got was a direct-to-Netflix, directed by my favorite director, wink wink, Mike Flanagan, weird mashup of great things that didn't really do anything at all for me. Now, there's many people on my server, we all read this kind of more or less together. I was the lagging one behind. They all kind of loved it. 2 of them really loved it. 2 of them, or 3 of them, thought it was okay. They had their criticisms. I was the only one in the bunch who just absolutely did not like this book whatsoever. A review is coming. Don't worry, I'll give you all my thoughts. But if you don't know what this book is about, it's about 2 women. They buy a house. They're planning on flipping it, and one day a family comes knocking on the door saying, we used to live here. Do you mind if we come in and take a look around? It would be very nostalgic for us. So I like the hook immediately right off the bat. Something weird is going on, but it really devolves into kind of a video game in novel form. Don't get me wrong, I love video games. I feel like this would make a great video game, but just not a novel. The pacing's all over the place. The prose is subpar. It was just not my cup of tea. But I don't want to get too far into it. I'll save it for the review. But that was my June, everybody. Let me know how your June was. Well, let's move on to what I'm going to read this month of July. The first book I'm reading is actually the one that almost won the poll last month, and that is The City and the City by China Miéville. I've read the entirety of part 1, so I'm over a third into the novel already. I'm not super impressed with it. It really seems to suffer from the same problem many sci-fi novels do, and that is ideas over drama, ideas over characterization, ideas. Ideas are great. I think they just need to have a foundation in characterization. Characterization and drama are what really get me to read. They get me invested in the characters. Atmosphere is also a great one. Ideas can help for sure, but without the other things, I'm generally bored to tears. You might as well write an essay about your quote-unquote ideas and leave it at that. But if you don't know, it's It's about a detective who is investigating a murder case. And the interesting thing here is that there are two cities. They kind of overlap each other in physical space to a degree, hence the name The City and the City. So it has this kind of sci-fi, alternate history, speculative fiction vibe to it. But so far, I'm early in, but it's a lot of world building in the regard of how these cities work. One thing I'll give China Mielville credit for is that he didn't just info dump a bunch of stuff on me. So hopping into this novel, you might be a little confused. I was definitely confused. As you make your way through it, you kind of come to grips with what's actually going on with the world he's created. So far, I'm not quitting it yet. I have been very tempted, but then around the 30% mark, finally something kicked in, something interesting kicked in. So we'll see if it carries me through to the end. But that's it. The City and the City by China Mielville. The next book I'm going to read is Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry. The classic Western, the fantastic, or so I've been told, epic. This one was recommended to me recently by my friend Britton, who has the channel here on YouTube called Some Okie Dude. I also remember way back in my Barnes & Noble days when I was about 25 years old, one of the guys I worked with was reading Lonesome Dove, and he said it was amazing. He loved it. And I'll never forget him out on break, sitting in front of the store, lighting a cigarette with this big fat paperback of Lonesome Dove. So finally, I'm going to tackle this thing. I don't even really know what it's about, so I can't tell you. It's a Western. I hear there's some funny dialogue. We'll see how it goes. The third book I'm going to read in July is one that I got another request. So this publisher contacted me and said, hey, do you want to read this book? I'll send you a free copy if you review it. Normally, I'm less enthusiastic about this kind of thing because it's often people who are just trying to get a review and don't know my tastes, and they're just kind of throwing anything at me, which was the first thing I thought of when I saw this cover. No offense to the graphic designer or the publisher, but this cover does not grab my attention. Kind of looks like a Lifetime movie, but you can see it's a speculative triptych. It's by Kevin P. Keating. It's a short novel. It's only about 200 pages. But after reading the description, it caught my interest because it's 3 novellas in one, and they all take place in different time periods. The first one in 1957, the next one in 1857, and the final one in 2057. So it's speculative. It's kind of sci-fi. I hope it might be up my alley. We'll see how it goes. This is a third book. So what is the fourth book, everybody? Well, you tell me. You guys know how it goes. Down in the comments below, suggest a book for me. Upvote your comment, and other people who like your comment, upvote that as well, because what I do is I will take the most upvoted, the top 4 upvoted books down below, put them in a poll, you guys vote. I will read and guarantee a video review of the book that is chosen. So don't forget those upvotes. That's how I pick them. Well, that is it for me. Thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging out with me. Don't forget to let me know down in the comments what you read last month, if there's anything great, and what you're planning to read in the month of July. And for all of my American brethren out there, hopefully you have a great 4th of July, and I will see you guys in the next one.